Why did we decide to release these weekly?
Because the podcast pantry started growing mold.
No, it did. Oh, ew.
Ugh, even the Bottomless Pit. See? This can is so moldy you can barely read the label.
The one we did with Abby Kirby?
Yeah, the one that was supposed to promote the 10th anniversary zine that already came and went.
Yeah, I remember.
The one that benefited a charity?
I know, just open the can already. What is it now?
Wasn't me. It just came out when I opened the can.
When you... Shit.
Let me take a closer look.
Wait.
What the hell was that?
Yeah, that's not an episode. Ow! It's the wormhole where I put all our filler words in long pauses.
Oh, so that's why I kept hearing us say, and I mean, and like, and... I pause a lot, haven't you noticed? Whoa! Ow! Oh, hey, I found the actual episode.
Okay, throw the other one away from us.
Whoosh! Ugh! Well, never liked that chair anyway.
AJ, tell me a story.
I would be happy to tell you a story. Once there was a little boy who walked down the street and greeted all of his neighbors at the same time because the boy had 10,000 arms. And nobody thought this was weird. Everybody waved back like it was a normal day, and it was a perfectly sunny day until a cloud moved in. Thunder struck, the lightning flashed, and rain came and melted the boy away because he was made out of slushy. Blue raspberry flavored slushy to be exact. And he melted deep into the grass, and suddenly, a blue raspberry slushy tree grew from the puddle, and everybody had slushies and was happy.
That was too scary. I can't sleep after that. Abby, you tell me a story.
Once upon a time, by a riverbank, there was a special plant, and this plant grew corn dogs. And one day, someone who is definitely not me, was just a random person outside one day, walking around and minding their business, saw the magic corn dog plant, and decided to have a sweet taste of that forbidden treat. And when that person, who again, definitely 100% was not me, it was just some random person, bit into the corn dog, it felt a little fuzzy, and it definitely didn't taste like corn dog, it tasted like plant. And then that person realized it was a cattail and not a corn dog at all. The end.
A valuable lesson to be learned, definitely.
So these two stories are about people going to magical plants that give them delicious, unhealthy treats because they don't have 7-Eleven in their neighborhood. Let's start the episode. Welcome to Into the Falls, a Gravity Falls podcast. I'm Mary, and I know lots of things.
I'm AJ, and I know nothing.
This is a podcast where I guide AJ through the wonderful weirdness of Gravity Falls, my favorite show that he has never seen.
If you're a new arrival like me, or looking to relive some crazy summer memories, come with us, and let's dive into the falls.
Welcome to Into the Falls, a Gravity Falls podcast. I'm Mary, and I know lots of things.
I'm AJ, and I know nothing.
You know who else knows things? Our special guest star, Abby Kirby. Woo! Give her a hand. Abby, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Abby Kirby. I am a Gravity Falls fan, and I am also a fan studies scholar. So I study fans, fandom, and media.
She's got a master's degree in fan studies, y'all.
So tell us about kind of how you got into Gravity Falls, if you remember, like, when you started watching it, what drew you to it?
So I actually started watching on day one of the show. So I was there for the inception. And I remember seeing the commercials for it. At the time, I was 16 and my younger sister was 11. So she was in the target age for the show, and I was just kind of older sister. And she and I had come to an agreement that we would try to do more things together. And this was the thing that actually she said that she wanted us to do together. She said, there's going to be this new Gravity Falls show. You've seen the trailers. I think we'd both really like it, so that's going to be the thing that we do together. I didn't think much of it other than I thought it looked like an interesting show. I wasn't expecting it to be as, like, nearly good and fantastic as it ended up being. We sat down and we watched that first episode together as it aired, and that for me just kind of became the moment where I was like, I don't know how, but now things are very different. Like, I have entered into a different timeline. This was the branch off of that time tree.
Everything is different. It's just so weird how these things, like, affect us so much. It's weird to think that for me and Abby it happened around the same time, because I graduated 8th grade in 2012, so I know that's when I started getting into Disney and buying these DVDs, and that's when Gravity Falls came out, so we were kind of having this inception in these, like, parallel timelines.
Mary and I are, like, connected through this, like, spiritual string that's running across the universe, or we just so happen to, around the same time, had these epiphanies.
Yeah, and now we're here.
Who knows? Maybe in an alternate universe, Abby's the one I do the podcast with, and you're currently our special guest, Mary.
Well, one thing we all know is that this is Bottomless Pit! Exclamation point.
In this land of ours, there are many great pits, but none more bottomless than the Bottomless Pit, which, as you can see here, is bottomless.
AJ, you're seeing this for the first time. What's your response?
I kind of predicted last time we were here that this was going to be sort of like a clip show kind of thing. And it was, with the various stories. It's all just stories.
A clip show implies that, like, they're taking scenes that have already aired and just, like, putting them back in to save time and money. This is an anthology.
Yeah. I gotta wonder if maybe they had these 3 stories ideas that were just, like, off to the side and that weren't quite enough to develop into full episodes. And then one day they were like, hey, you know what? We should make an anthology and just hammer out these 3 stories and make them exist.
So kind of the genesis for this episode, if you listen to the commentary, their art department wanted them to do an episode with less backgrounds.
So just make a black background for, like, all of the interstitial bits.
Well, yeah, originally that was the plan, is, like, they're gonna fall into a bottomless pit.
Which, as you can see here, is bottomless.
And it's just gonna be black the whole time. And then they're like, we can't make this interesting if it's just them falling in the pit. Let's have them, like, do an anthology, so they're telling each other stories. They ended up having to do more backgrounds anyway. It did save time for the writers, because Alex Hirsch and Michael Rianda, no matter what, they had an episode due by a certain point. So they're like, we have to put out something, and it'll be easier for us to write 3 shorter stories than 1 big one. By comparison with the rest of Gravity Falls, it's kind of these little simple stories. Dipper doesn't like his voice. Yeah. He tries to change it. They get caught in a pinball machine. I can't imagine any of these actually going for 21 minutes. And, like, Stan's really great. Grunkle Stan wins the football bowl. That's what it was.
I'll tell you a good story. It's called Grunkle Stan Wins the Football Bowl.
They wanted to make that a full segment. They didn't have time for it, so they just wrote this little gag, and I guess Alex basically wrote it just to make Michael Rianda laugh. They sent the draft in, and they didn't get a note to cut that segment, so they just kept it in.
And all of these stories really are just great insight into these characters and how they develop, what they're dealing with. Dipper's a 12-year-old boy, so he's got 12-year-old boy voice problems. That's really relatable.
Nice to meet you. My name's Dipper Pines. Fine. Nice to meet you. Fine. Do I really sound like that?
Oh, here comes my favorite part.
Stop it, guys!
We get to see Seuss shine a little more. Usually he's just been our Big Ed. He's there, he's chummy, he's amiable, but here he gets a little deeper.
I didn't really think about that until you said it just now, that this is really, like, each segment is about something that character really values. So, like, with Dipper, it's his voice and him, like, not wanting to be made fun of, wanting to be be taken seriously, wanting to kind
Yes.
of like seem older and more mature. With Seuss, it's that he doesn't feel like he's really accomplished anything. So this is about a time that he accomplished something and then had to give it up. And then with Mabel, she has this very set moral code, and it's about her learning. She can't always stick to it.
It's interesting. I'm just watching it. I'm like, oh, it's not that deep. They're simple stories, funny jokes, and then it's like you talk about it more and it's like, oh, there really was something there.
When Seuss says, are either of you really good at jumping up and down and making annoying noises? And Mabel stands up and says, my time has come.
Are either of you good at jumping up and down and making annoying noises?
My time has come.
That line was in every single promo, and that's how I know that I was in the fandom by this point, because I remember seeing so many of those promos. Abby, do you remember your first time seeing this episode? Was there anything that really stuck out?
I definitely do remember, like, thinking, hey, this episode's a little bit quirky and different. Like, just aside from the fact that it's told anthology style. But that it was, like, kind of playing with Gravity Falls' formula a little bit. Gravity Falls is just my favorite thing about the show. It has such a predictable formula for every single episode. Everything that happens in it is different, but it has, like, a very strong beginning, middle, end. It's got that 3-part structure, all the things that an English teacher like me loves to see. But this is kind of doing it a little bit differently, where it was kind of, as you said, like all of these layered texts, and instead of each episode trying to be about, you know, something that's happening in the larger world of Gravity Falls, it really was just like bite-sized moments of character, which we really weren't getting a lot of up until that point. We had just like sort of finished the fans' introduction to Gravity Falls and what we can expect from this world, and now that's the part where when you're writing a TV show, you start to pick it up a little bit more and you introduce more concepts, you start to get a little bit heavier into the plot. So I think like putting this episode basically right towards the middle of the whole season was kind of a nice way to stop and be like, all right, let us lay this down for you guys. Let's return to these characters. The moment when your English teacher gives you the stupid little worksheet to fill out when you're halfway through reading the book. That's kind of what this episode was, to just sort of go back and say like, okay, let's revisit the cast. Who are they? What do they want? What are they struggling with? And what are their strengths as well? And I thought that was kind of just a really neat way to do so much character development in what is quite literally like 5 minutes per character.
Yeah, and that's always, everyone points to the characters as this show's biggest strength. You're gonna forget this world and like these little quirky things that just kind of exist around them long before you forget these characters and their personalities. And that is the thing that has stuck with so many fans, myself included. And we talked a lot about it in the first episode. If you have like a really cool environment, but your characters are like bland and forgettable, we're gonna forget the show. We're not gonna care about anything that happens. In an episode, it doesn't have these world-ending stakes. We still remember it because we love these characters, and that's why we keep going back to this show, and that's why we were watching it to begin with.
This is actually probably one of my favorite Stan episodes. If you like look at the episode very logically, it feels like Stan has kind of been brushed off to the side. Like he gets truth teeth put in his mouth, which I think is just a hilarious continuity moment about whether or not he has teeth.
Ew, goodness gracious.
I just thought that was like the weirdest character detail, or I was like, wait, does he or does he not have dentures? Because I would believe it going either way.
Well, according to Alex Hirsch in the episode commentary, from this point on, Stan has dentures because he doesn't take good care of himself. He doesn't go to the dentist. He is that unkempt.
I really love the interactions that Stan has in this episode because it feels like he's the butt of the joke, but we're also really getting into Stan's head and what causes him to tick. I think Crunkle Stan wins the football bowl. Beyond just being an iconic part of Gravity Falls, it cracks me up every time. There's the line where like the football player is like, I thought that old folks were useless, but you taught me and my gloating friends a lesson.
Mr. Pines, I thought old folks were useless, but you taught me and my gloating friends a lesson. Yeah!
Here's your football winning trophy, Mr. Pines.
Thanks, beautiful woman.
Kind of start to get the idea that Stan feels like he isn't good for anything, or that people just sort of see him as a dumb old man, and don't really appreciate what he does. And we also get that reiterated with the Truth Teeth episode through Dipper and Mabel's lens, in the lens that the show presents Stan through. We like kind of get like he's a cheap, sleazy old man who lies and steals. But then when he like gets the Truth Teeth, you realize like how much Stan actually has this act together. Like he is constantly thinking about the next thing to say. He's a little bit smarter than he's been letting on, and it reveals a little bit more to him than what we had been getting previously. I think that was really clever.
Yeah, that's also something I didn't think about that much with this episode in particular, but we're seeing that he really craves like this external validation, and it just kind of comes through in these ways that like to us kind of sound stupid, but when you go deeper, these are all revealing things about these characters, very important facets of their personalities. We talked a lot in the earlier episodes of season 1 how they always find some way to get Stan out of the room while this supernatural stuff is going on. And sometimes it works into the plot, like with Boss Mabel. The entire impetus for that episode happening is that Stan goes on vacation and leaves the kids in charge. And this is one of the first episodes that we see him actually involved with it, because they all fall into this pit. He knows that this is a wormhole. They are all on the same level in this situation.
Can I talk briefly about how much I love the trope of how are we going to create stakes? Oh, let's have this imaginary wind or whatever. And I mean, that happens twice in this episode with the rainstorm, and that is what causes them all to fall into the pit. And then in the pinball segment, Seuss finally has to make his big decision to let go of his high score.
When I turned on this episode last night, the first frame came up and I'm like, what was the framing device for this? Why are they telling stories? The episode is called Bottomless Pit,
Which, as you can see here, is bottomless.
and I remembered that very quickly, but at first I like half expected them to just be like sitting around in a room like, hey, do you remember when we got sucked into a pinball machine? Let's tell that story. It just speaks to how long it's been since I've seen this. This is really the first time we get a decent look at the Bottomless Pit.
Which, as you can see here, is bottomless.
Obviously our confirmation that it is in fact bottomless, as you can see here, is bottomless.
I don't remember exactly like where we've seen the bottomless pit before. Maybe you can help me out with that.
Well, in the first episode, Stan's giving a tour, and I think in Fight Fighters, Robbie's looking for Wendy, and Dipper's like, oh, I think I saw her in the bottomless pit. You should go jump in there.
Bottomless pit.
Great line. Dipper
you
never really gets to have those zingers, but that was a really great line from him. Mabel mentions in her story, she mentions the journal. That's supposed to be a secret from Stan. Did she just kind of fudge that in her telling of the story? Like, we're seeing what really happened, but she just says, oh, and I found this in the woods.
Loved that conversation that was going on in the fandom at the time, because there was like this moment. I remember it was never something that I think fans went too deeply into, because there was some theory that maybe none of the stories were true, or that there was like some other reason for it. Maybe that she is not telling the whole truth and we as the audience are only seeing the whole truth. But I do remember some Tumblr posts going around being like, wait a second.
Usually I've seen when people do these kinds of stories, the storyteller is usually biased, and then you're seeing the storyteller's interpretation of that character. It felt like these stories didn't have that bias.
I do think it's more in character for Mabel to just forget that Stan doesn't know about that and to just mention it.
You guys talk about these really big moments of continuity and big, huge, overarching plot points. I just haven't really noticed that as of yet. I feel like things are going to start to ramp up from here. I mean, they've got to.
Well, we're like 3/4 of the way through this season, so at some point, yeah, that's going to happen. Oh, spoilers.
It's just interesting to see the clash of experiences there.
It's okay, AJ. We all noticed it 10 years ahead of you, so we have that information for you.
It's a thirsty old sponge.
Something that definitely gives us more insight into Stan's character as well is when they fall into the pit. He is not that upset about it.
It's almost like he's fallen in before.
I think it's just he's been in really weird situations before, and so he's just kind of used to it by now.
Doesn't bat an eye at anything.
He has
weird.
more experience than the other characters, being much older than them, so I think it's just like, all right, things happen that you're not prepared for, and you just gotta take it in stride. Who makes remixes and then, like, has a voice note at the end saying, this remix is dedicated to my brother Dipper? I know we need it for plot purposes to, like, move things along, but who does that?
You guys don't do things entirely for plot purposes? You don't think to yourself, this might influence the story later, so I better make sure I'm being super clear about what's happening right now?
That's how I live my life, is like, what's the most script efficient way to to go about this. It's really impressive how Dipper's, like, fake announcer voice still kind of sounds like him in terms of, like, inflection. You can basically hear Jason Ritter reading these lines. Does Dipper, like, greet himself in the mirror every morning? Is that a normal thing for him to wake up and be like, Good morning, Dipper?
I hope so. That kid needs some confidence.
Absolutely.
Good for him. Who's my favorite Mabel? I love that she hears that and, like, wastes no time grabbing whatever it is she hits him with, a bat or whatever.
Morning, Mabel. Who's my favorite Mabel?
Ah! Who are you? What have you done with my brother? Dipper, I'll save you from this body-switching warlock!
And then Seuss, Kill It With Fire was, like, a huge thing in 2013. Everyone said that about everything. You just see a picture of, like, a big spider. You're like, kill it with fire!
How you diddly doing, Seuss?
Kill it! Kill it with fire! Everyone flee!
And then, like, it stopped being funny, and then the show said it anyway. There's no beat where they're like, wait, what? They just immediately jump to, like, we have to beat the shit out of him. I love Seuss yelling, everyone flee! And everyone actually leaves the gift shop.
Yeah, I guess little moments like that are what makes this my favorite segment in this episode.
I don't know what my favorite is. Gun to my head, I'd say the pinball one. I love in between stories, Mabel's like, let's pass the time by spinning. Everyone spin. She, like, starts rotating Dipper. And, like, it's...
Who wants to pass the time by spinning? Everyone spin!
No.
Whee!
And, like, walking on him like she's on a rolling log in the water. And then, like, you see him in the background when Seuss is introducing his story. He's just like, and then you look at his face and he just looks mildly annoyed. He doesn't look that scared.
It makes you kind of wonder, because we've seen how wide this bottomless pit
Which, as you can see here, is bottomless.
is, but that moment right there makes it seem a lot wider than we first saw. Like, how wide does this bottomless pit get as you go further down?
Abby, do you have anything to say about the voiceover segment?
Do I?
That's a great answer.
The answer is yes, but just have I forgotten my thoughts? Do I have thoughts, or am I myself a mere construct?
Sometimes I think, is this all there is? Is life just some kind of horrific joke without a punchline? That we're all just biding our time until the sweet, sweet release of death?
I think overall that's my favorite segment as well, but some of my favorite moments are in other segments.
I think some of the best jokes come from the other two, even if you don't like the stories as much.
I think this one has the most cohesive story out of all of them. Not that the others are bad, but this one just feels really streamlined to me, and I'm like, yeah.
I think it feels the most like it could be a full episode.
It would have been really cool if it was a full episode.
Imagine if after Dipper gets over, he goes back to Old Man McGucket, and it sort of turns into this Little Mermaid kind of thing where somehow Old Man McGucket just gets his voice, and then Dipper's just left silent, and then whatever big bad McGucket has in store, he just has to beat it while silent, and then that's how he gets his voice back.
You know what? I think Jason Ritter would have earned a break somewhere in there. I feel like I looked at it one time, and that throughout the entire series, he does the most heavy lifting in terms of voicing only one character, whereas you kind of have Alex Hirsch up there, just kind of talking to himself all the time.
And screaming.
He talks a lot. Like, he'll go through episodes where he will have most of the dialogue, and I'm like, that's so weird.
I mean, Double Dipper, he's literally
it.
voicing like 10 clones of himself.
Yeah, he's doing all of that. I would have loved it, though, if that were a full episode and that was how it went, where it just ends with Dipper being completely silent. And just because I think the animators would have come up with some of, like, the best expressions and movements in the entire show if that was what they had to deal with. It would have been hilarious to watch that happen.
Hilarious!
And then to have Jason Ritter recording the dialogue for Old Man McGucket.
Oh my god.
It just would have been perfect. Everything about that would have been perfect. And now I have to live with that in my heart, that it's not real, but at the same time, fan fiction is also real. So
very true.
Yeah,
that's
definitely part of my experience. There was a fanfic where the entire premise was based in this AU, and this is Gravity Falls, so I'm not going to say what the AU was because it's a spoiler, but it made me so sad that I had to stop reading it. The sad thing wasn't canon. It was only in the fanfic. I'm just like, this is too much. I can't do it.
That's my favorite kind of stuff. I live for that. So part of what I do as a fan studies scholar, and this is particular to me, is that after I had kind of like done a lot of thinking about Gravity Falls as it was and how it presented, I was still like, these are some weird fans. These people got issues, and you know what? I got issues too. So one of the things I looked particularly at, and this was the concept of my master's thesis, was that I looked at Gravity Falls AUs. I looked at one in particular, which is known for being weird and having literally nothing to do with Gravity Falls, and I think that's what makes it special. The way we interact with fan fiction in particular as a form of fandom is beyond weird and does not get even enough attention in fan studies. Because we have such deep emotions to it that it feels like canon, but it's not canon. And I've heard people talk and say, like, yeah, this one thing happened in this fan fiction, and I love that fan fiction. But then I forgot that it wasn't canon, and then I thought that the canon was fan fiction, and everything got all mixed up inside my head. And I'm like, yeah, man.
I've definitely had that
trippy.
experience before. Like, I saw It Chapter 2, and it broke my heart, and I cried so much because this particular character died. So I, of course, turned to fan fiction where that character did not die. Sometimes I'll forget that that's not canon.
It's weird the way, like, we cope with things, because the interesting thing I learned while doing research is that we have this dichotomy in fandom between real and not real, canon and not canon, but that is not necessarily true to how we operate as people. Instead, there is, like, this third category that's called real to me, where you believe so deeply in something or you enjoyed it so much that regardless of how much you try to remind yourself it's not part of the actual story, it feels real 100% of the time. And fandoms will go through this process with their fan fiction and with AUs and with fan art called reification, which is where so many people like this thing so much and believe so hard in it that it becomes its own thing and could very realistically just be treated as an independent fandom.
Does that describe fanon, or is that kind of a different thing?
It's neither. It's neither fanon nor canon. I got to create the word for what it is, and it's super obnoxious. I call it hyperdiegetic narrative, meaning that it feels in some way reasonable to the audience. It fits all of their expectations, or it fits all of their desires. So something about it feels reasonable enough that it could be considered real, and then you just invest yourself so much in it that it becomes a narrative. It becomes something that feels tangible to you despite not being, it's like, it goes over my head sometimes, and I have like a 90-page paper about this concept alone. It is fascinating just to think about the ways that something that is, quite frankly, of our own creation, of another fan's creation, something that you make yourself can become so attached to your fandom, to your love object, that it is just real from that point on, and there is no undoing it, regardless of what anybody says. Also real at the same time. It's like having multiple realities in a way.
That's so fascinating.
Really interesting. Yeah, I want to read that paper now.
Mary could definitely read it. AJ, I'm sorry, you can't read it because it does spoil a little bit about Gravity Falls. Just a small amount.
I mean, no big.
Enough that it would ruin the show for you.
I love the idea that there's a normal amount of green lightning that can come out of that pinball machine and that Seuss knows what it is.
Guys, there's an awful lot of green lightning coming out of that game.
Nah, that's the normal amount of green lightning.
No one always does that.
And it's funny that this is the one time that he misjudges how much green lightning is coming out of it, because that's the one time they get sucked in and have to fight the big skull in the center.
When Seuss is like punching the little thing in the pinball machine and his fist just comes right back and hits him. That's me when I pick up a pair of pants and they're inside out and I like put my arm through and then I like pull it out too fast and punch myself in the boob.
Oh no.
It's a very specific image, but relatable.
We gotta talk about Grunkle Stan wins the football bowl. Which we have a little bit, but not like in depth. The colors on the football uniforms are like green and yellow. Are these the Packers or the non-existent Holland's football team? Because my school colors are green and gold, and we sell these t-shirts that say like Holland's football undefeated since 1842 because we've never had a football team, and that's the joke. We don't even have a mascot. We're like one of the only schools in the country that doesn't have a mascot.
That's the way it should be.
I love that when he finishes telling it, they all hate it.
Yeah,
and like even Seuss, who like idolizes Stan, even he's booing him. They're like, this sucks.
What did he say?
They go, boo.
Yeah.
Stan's like, what? That was a great story.
Oh, I'm
Adventure and a talking robot
incredulous.
for the kids.
For the kids.
Stan just doesn't know what kids
I love
like.
the Footbot. I love that it comes out of nowhere.
But I couldn't have done it without my sidekick, Footbot.
Thank you for building me, Daddy. I love you, Stan.
Thank you for building me,
it starts off
Daddy.
I do not like how
it
I called him Daddy.
I think that's the best part, because if we think about this in terms of the narrative, I love how it seems like Stan is like, okay, I won a football game once, and it's like, okay, sure. But then there was a beautiful woman and a huge trophy, and then it just kind of turns into like Stan's ridiculous fantasies, and like a robot named Footbot, and that Footbot sees me as its father. Like
it's my trusty sidekick.
Maybe Stan should actually start writing novels.
He should start writing novels. I think Stan would have a lot of interesting things to say.
You can start with Crime Grandpa. The beginning when he's so excited about teaching a bear to drive, that reminds me of a joke from XIV movie. I don't remember which one, but it's this mad scientist who's like, they told me I could never teach a llama to drive, and then the llama immediately drives off the cliff.
No, llama, no!
No, llama, no!
Oh no, I am not stepping on you.
By far my favorite part. I love the part where it's like, Stan needs a bear. Signed Dr. Medicine. Gets me every time, and I think that is up there with like probably like my top 5 quoted things. I'll be at work and my kids will be like, Miss Kirby, why are you doing that? And I'll be like, I have a note, and I'll just pull out this note that says, like, Miss Kirby needs to do this thing. Signed Dr. Medicine. The kids are like, who's Dr. Medicine? And I'm like, he's a doctor, and we can't argue with it.
He's the doctor.
The Dr. Medicine.
I love the expression when Stan is telling the kids his plan. He's like, I'm going to teach this bear to drive. He's like cross-eyed and just this maniacal grin. He's just so far gone, no one can convince him this is a bad idea.
Drive.
And I mean,
and the bear does not do that bad a job driving. Like, for an animal, it's doing pretty well.
Serpentine.
I love Stan trying to get out of this ticket by, like, leaning into the senile old man thing. It's just being so aware of his own mortality.
He's constantly just like, everybody thinks I'm an old man. I'm gonna use that to commit crimes.
Yeah. Dipper, like, comes in through the doorway looking for spaghetti. The pose is just, like, it's like a half-assed kind of T-pose. He just stands like that for the entire conversation. Stan stole his spaghetti for some reason. It's gotta be cold by now.
It's really Dipper's fault for just leaving it out. He should have foreseen that this was gonna happen, so really it's Dipper's fault.
Poor Seuss getting thrown under the bus, and Dipper just turning really grave and just being, this is a dark day. Like, what is he gonna do?
I just think it's great that they're like, okay, in this scene we need to have Dipper come in looking for something and Stan has it. But the immediate thing they go for is like, what if it's a plate of spaghetti? And I'm like, one option is that he just had a plate of spaghetti, walked away for a moment, and then it was gone. Or the spaghetti was like in the fridge, unmarked, and then
he was saving it for a special occasion.
Yeah, like,
Office rules, I love that.
It's like, okay, your name should have been on that.
I think it's like something that makes it like very obvious that Stan has it because he gets the sauce on his face, and Dipper like still believes him for some reason. This is making me want pasta. I'm gonna have pasta after this.
Nice.
I just continue with the spaghetti plate. When Mabel gets the truth teeth, and then she asks Stan, like, what happened to Dipper's spaghetti plate? And then he just says very plainly, I ate it because I have little to no concern about other people's possessions or emotions. That was strangely candid.
Almost as if I'm
unable to lie.
Well, good night.
Good night.
Well, good night. During these lines of just brutal honesty, has a smile on his face, or he's just completely nonchalant when he's doing his taxes, and Dipper's like, why did you write this? And he just turns to him with this big smile on his face, like, because I regularly commit massive tax fraud.
Grunkle Stan, why did you write this?
Because I regularly commit massive tax fraud.
I love the way that Stan speaks through this entire thing. Part of it is like, okay, yeah, so you're unable to lie. I don't understand why that changes the way he's speaking in any manner. I love
because when you tell
like,
the truth, you just do it in like this matter-of-fact way. The truth is out there, and it is what it is.
Okay, so there's the part where Dipper says, Stan, what do you do in secret every day during your lunch break? And then Stan, and just like, again, the most nonchalant way, says, usually I spend the hour aggressively scratching myself in places I shouldn't mention. I feel like regular Stan would just say, I scratch myself.
Can I scratch myself?
Just plain and simple, but I just love that the truth teeth also involves giving Stan this, like, again, like this really quirky inflection. And
he becomes like more eloquent.
And he just like gets on like this new persona, like, oh, well, now I'm going to tell you the truth, but I'm going to do it fancily.
He describes the details, and I guess in that situation, he would still tell the truth, but these teeth make him tell the whole truth. Like, you're gonna know the truth and the little nitty-gritty details that you don't want to know.
There are, like, theories and, like, questions as to, like, oh, if he can't lie, why don't the kids find out what's going on behind the vending machine? Like, why doesn't he mention that? And I think it's just because the kids didn't ask.
They didn't think
Yeah.
They don't have a reason to think that there's anything wrong with that, so they don't bring it up, so he doesn't tell them what's going on.
And I mean, do they even know that there's something behind the vending machine?
If the kids knew there was something behind the vending machine, that would be the plot of this season, would be them trying to figure out what that was.
That's just an audience thing. Like, that's there to be like, hey, you, viewer at home, I want you to lose your mind. I want you to go absolutely apeshit.
So we've confirmed that Deputy Durland is illiterate.
I love that.
They hinted at it in Irrational Treasure. Mabel picked up on the fact that he probably can't read. They have a little lover's quarrel because Durland hasn't noticed that Blubs has lost weight.
Something they gotta work out at home.
Keep your work and your professional lives separate.
And don't say sorry.
Don't say gay.
Yes.
It's ahead of its time, not saying gay. You can be gay, you just can't say it. Well, Sheriff Blubs comes to his door and says there is no Dr. Medicine in Gravity Falls. How do you know it's supposed to be in Gravity Falls? It's a small town. He could go out of town to see his doctor.
Maybe Gravity Falls is just a suburb of Portland.
They, like, show it on a map in the first episode. I think Portland is, like...
opposite direction.
Yeah.
This is the episode where, alongside the cryptogram changing, is also the one where Stan's hat changes.
Oh, yeah.
Does it?
It does.
Yeah, they changed the symbol on it.
They did?
Yeah.
I did not notice.
Look at his fez in the first episode versus this one.
Okay. Oh my gosh, and Dipper's hat does change.
Well, yeah, that was like a plot point.
Yeah.
That he loses that while they're fighting the gnomes, and then he gets his new hat at the end of that episode.
Yeah.
I don't know why I don't remember these things. Let's see. Backwards fish for Stan in Tourist Trapped. It does change, huh? It's a Pac-Man with wings on it. No, wait. It's still a fish, but it's not like a solar eclipse.
It's like a diagram of an eye, right? It's like biologically anatomically what an eye looks like from the side.
There are all different.
Yeah, but it also straight up looks like Pac-Man
said.
eating a pellet.
It says like similar to Pac-Man on the website. It's like definitely a Freemasons reference. But what it is actually supposed to be, fish is like the other one that gets constantly mentioned for reasons I'm not gonna say.
When they're like about to arrest him for all these crimes he's just confessed to, he just holds out his hands like, just ready to be cuffed.
Take me away.
Yeah, I forgot to tell him about my tax fraud. No, tax fraud. When I first saw this episode and Mabel's like pushing in her chest full of mysterious secrets, nothing worth wondering about, I was so sure that we weren't going to get an answer for that. It was just going to be a one-off joke, but it turns out no, that's where they locked up the teeth so they never plight them again.
You know, it's weird. Seeing it for the first time, you're like, oh, nobody knows about what's in that chest, and Mabel's trying very hard to be like, yeah, nobody knows what's in this chest. And then it just turns out they all know. Seuss got his shoes back. His shoes.
Good for him. When they like see the light at the bottom, Stan like pulls back and he's like ready to punch whatever is down there. Like, what does he think is about to happen?
So it's a wormhole, right? And they just get spit out and find themselves back where they were. But do they? Really? Is it really like exactly back where they were? They know that all this supernatural stuff is happening. And some of our characters know about the journal. I so want to believe that they've just found themselves now in an alternate dimension where everything on the surface looks exactly the same. And then this is the point where all the shit's about to go down.
That's like what happened in Rick and Morty.
Yeah. Oh, maybe it was a Rick and Morty episode all along.
Oh, no.
Oh, jeez.
I love the beat in between them saying, like, we're not going to tell anybody. There's, like, a very brief silence, and then the sign breaks and Stan goes flying back in.
Agreed.
He'll be fine.
It's just typical. Of course it happened to Stan. It's like the perfect ending. I love how there's at least something amusing in these during credits gags, but here literally nothing happens because Stan's just all alone, falling again in this bottomless pit.
Which, as you can see here, is bottomless.
Well, that is amusing. Just watching him suffer.
Just look around at nothing and come to the realization that it's all stupid. This is all stupid.
He's old, he knows that. Abby, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We got some very interesting insight from you that may or may not make it into the final episode. I am getting hungry. We have been on a call for 3.5 hours now. But, AJ, I gotta tell you the title of the next episode.
Yeah, and you gotta tell me what the code means. The cipher we're using is the A113 cipher. Just kidding. It's the A1Z26 cipher. And our code this week is next up, Footbot 2, Grunkle's Grevenge.
Well, that ended up not really working out because the next episode is actually called The Deep End.
Ooh, we go from the bottomless pit,
Which, as you can see here, is bottomless,
to the deep end. Which is worse to fall into? I'm going with my theory that this world that they've ended up in outside the wormhole is not the same as the one they left. I feel like the deep end title is very appropriate. This is where we go off the deep end, but you know, you can clue me in as to whether I'm right or whether I'm spouting nonsense.
I'm not cluing you into anything. That's the point of this show. Until next time.
Oh, real quick, Abby, where can we find you? Where can we find you?
Oh, yes. Yes, social medias. Let's go.
You can find me on Twitter at Abby E. Kirby. Ask me any questions you want about fan studies, about Gravity Falls.
It's me again, Mary from the future. If I can be completely transparent, we kinda knew back when we recorded this that there was a chance it wouldn't come out in time for more people to order the Gravity Falls 10 years later zine. Not much else I can do about that, except to promote the wonderful people who worked on it. That includes me, Abby, and a score of other talented writers, artists, and designers, such as Amuk, Artsy Meeshee, Cindy, Elena or Demico Art, Elodie Chen, Fexiled, Foxie Skullz Artz, Hellman, Eregyrn, Inabsurd, Infriga, Lilac Kat Weather, LB Productions, Madison W, MG, Tanya or Mistrel Fox, Natalie, Pinceau Arc-en-Ciel, ProfCinnaRollz, Rin, Rum, Sam, Sarah Neves, Steph Reyna, Taco, Taz Miilly, T Blooming, and Tiff Bee. It was such a wonderful experience to be a part of this project with all of these creators who will be listed in the episode description with links to their social media. I highly recommend you check them out. They all did incredible work on the zine, and several of them take commissions. Whether or not you ordered a copy of the zine back in 2022, their art is still out there, and there are other Gravity Falls fan projects coming out that I'm equally excited for and will also be in the description. Proceeds for the zine went to Planned Parenthood, and if you're able to donate, I encourage you to do that as well. As always, thank you all for your patience and for continuing to listen to this show as we fill in these gaps. We'll see you again soon.
All right, well, until next time, this has been Into the Falls. Let's go dive into this bottomless pit and finish our podcast. This has been Into the Falls. You can find me at Mabel Page Pines on Twitter and Instagram. That's Mabel, P-A-G-E Pines. I'm also May Page on YouTube and Film Knife on Medium and WordPress. That's where I post my film reviews and essays, editorials, etc. You can follow the show on Twitter at The Falls Cast, all one word, and Into the Falls Podcast on YouTube. And I will hand it off to AJ.
This podcast is hosted and produced by Mary McKeon and AJ Sanchez, and our theme song and some of the music is by Kevin MacLeod. Oh, and follow me on Instagram. And I make YouTube videos sometimes. Unca AJ. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time, trust no one!
I love experimenting on these kids and being like, ooh, what do they think is going to happen? And then, like, by day 2, they're all like, I found fan fiction on the internet and it wasn't what I was expecting. And I'm like, okay, well, that's a different life lesson. And it's called, don't ever look something up on the internet until you're ready to suffer the consequences. Second of all, now you've just spoiled the entire show for yourself, and you're going to have nightmares, so way to go.